you know exactly where I'm starting. The S&P 500 right now has this big reject line. I've been talking about it forever, and literally this is the daily. Let's take a peek at the weekly. Weekly chart still has not broken down. Tried to break it, got rejected. Now it's kind of sitting right at that trend line again. So it needs to close above this for that confirmation for the breakout. And I'm still paying attention to this closely because this massive reject, same thing here. And now that we're trying to gain the strength with a lot of volume last week, that was strictly because of Federal Reserve Jerome Powell. So he was talking about how everything looks pretty good right now. They're going to start scaling back on raising interest rates, but jobs data on Friday did not look good. Well, it looked great, which kind of gives the Fed a green light to keep going aggressively. So we're going to see if he actually stays true to what he was talking about. But this is the weekly trend on the S&P 500. I think this week is going to be super choppy. There's not a lot coming out this week with the Fed decision next week and inflation data. So inflation data is going to be huge. If inflation data is still sky high and it is above expectations, we are going to see the market absolutely plummet. So I'm looking at this trend line still. 410 was the high. If we start breaking out towards that, we could see this 412 level. This is that most recent high. So if we get above 410. If we go back for that 410 test, I could see a 412 break. But I'm not seeing too much more on the upside. I think that the downside is a lot better to pay attention to. So if we start to see some weakness, we could retest this 401.50 support line from that 200 EMA, which is this green line right here. And then about the daily chart, let's say 1, 2, 3 days in, it could be around that $400 breakdown. So this wedge and this trend line is getting real tight on this, so it's going to have to make a real big decision pretty soon. And if it chops a little bit sideways this week, well, the Federal Reserve could make an impact on a huge move next week. So volatility has been pretty light the last few weeks. As you can see, it's been chopping in this range for quite a while. We had that massive day with the Federal Reserve. Jerome Powell talking on the economy and where we are. So there was a huge, massive spike there, but we're kind of having some trouble around this 410 level. So above 410, look for that 412 break, but I'm still looking for that rejection to the downside because there's so much more room to the downside than there is the upside on the daily chart. I also am paying attention to an earnings play this week. Lulu looks really good. Super bullish last week, broke out of a massive trend on the weekly chart. So look at how much bullish activity is going here, and it looks like this most recent high is 410. I just looked into its what did I just look into? I just looked into its web traffic views. The web traffic views are pretty consistent throughout. I might end up taking a position on this. I was looking at the options chain here. Lululemon has contracts for next week. Every time I play earnings, I always do the next week, so theta doesn't get me. Implied volatility percentage looks pretty good. It's around 60%. And if we get to that 410 level, these are worth 760 right now for next week expiration. But by the time it gets closer to Thursday, if I end up playing these, they'll be about 400, 450 a piece. And at that pace, then I'll probably end up playing one or two, maybe three, depending on how I trade this week. So I'll use profits from this trading week to maybe play into an earnings play because I could take about 450 to above 1600. So the risk reward there, is about 4x. So I always look for the 3 to 4 to 5x ratio when I'm playing earnings. So fits the threshold, and Lulu might have some good upside, but I'm going to have to wait and see how the market reacts. So one thing I want to point out on the charts from SPY and Lulu is the QQQ. As you notice, the market has been ripping, but on the weekly chart, obviously this inflationary market is kind of causing a hardship for technology stocks. So QQQ is taking a huge hit right here. I still am a big believer in the TQQQ, but that's when I start seeing a little bit more bullish momentum and people started coming back into the market because this hasn't broken its weekly downtrend yet, and it's kind of been just chopping around over here. So not a lot of big buyers back into tech just yet. You're seeing a lot of people in staples and a lot of different sectors throughout the S&P. So that's why you see the SPY moving a lot more than the QQQ. With that being said, there has been a boatload of buying in the SQQQ. That's been the silent loader that nobody's talking about right now. So I'm not convinced that this market is ready to rally just yet. So I'm paying attention to this level right here on the SQQQ. This is the inverse ETF for the QQQ. So this is basically like shorting the market with an ETF. So it's about $40 here. Its high at that low point was at 70. So this could be a great return if you want to play some shares, maybe some covered calls, or even just take an options play on this. You can see a nice little bounce here. So some calls in the SQQQ. If the market starts getting weak, I think could be a really good opportunity for some downside break. So SQQQ inverse to the Qs. SPY still looking at that huge rejection level, and I'm kind of liking the way that Lulu is setting up on top of Chewy for earnings on Thursday. So not a lot of opportunity this week that I'm seeing too much of right now with most of the events happening next week, but could see some low volume chop, some low volume volatility. So set your stops when you enter into positions. Uh, Respect your stop losses as always. Risk manage on the downside, and you know there might be some quick little moves that we can get on a low volume, low volatility week. So hopefully some of these levels help you out, and yeah, hopefully this SQQQ can actually start making an impact here pretty soon. So watch Lululemons for earnings. Chewy is also there. I love Chewy. That's a great stock. And yeah, that's all I got right now. So S&P 500, still looking for that reject level, and I'm positioning for the downside for a couple months out.